Hey everyone, welcome back to Horse 2 Cinema. So you guys know how Martin Scorsese made the news a couple years ago with his comments about Marvel movies? He basically said that, Marvel movies aren't cinema, they're something else. Well, I think I have just the movie that will change his mind about that. And of course, I'm talking about Morbius. This is Marvel's latest release. I don't think it's part of the MCU. I don't know. All these universes, they blend together for me. It's all the same stuff. I think it's in the Spider-Man Venom universe, which I guess is separate from the MCU, but aren't they planning to blend those? I don't know. Morbius stars Jared Leto as a doctor with a very rare blood disorder, who, when seeking a cure, does an experiment that goes horribly wrong and turns him into a vampire. I wasn't gonna see this movie originally, but after all of the early reviews came out, and it kind of just became a meme, I took it upon myself to go seek it out. If you watch my Spider-Man No Way Home review, you know how I feel about kind of Marvel's recent filmography. I really hate their aesthetic for a lot of their movies, just the way a lot of them are just so like glossy and overly loaded with CGI. I really dislike their, obsession with fan service and like plugging sequels in every goddamn, end credit sequence. And oftentimes when I'm watching them, I kind of feel like they're advertisements for themselves. And in some ways I really like the premise of Morbius, and I like how, it wanted to take the superhero movie genre back to how it used to be kind of in the early 2000s, where they were, B movies, essentially. I think in general, even though I like a lot of superhero movies nowadays, I think it would be better just for movies and just, and theaters if superhero movies kind of, became a bit more like that. So I was hoping it would be a really fun return to that kind of movie, and it wasn't. In some ways it is like that B-movie schlock that I was mentioning, but it's so poorly executed that you just kind of have to laugh at it. The plot that I mentioned is just so bland and boring and predictable. There's absolutely zero twists and turns. Everything, that you think is going to happen does happen eventually. And whenever the plot isn't really boring, it's unintentionally and hilariously stupid. I wouldn't call this a so bad it's good movie because it's way too boring to be that. But there are times where it does flirt with being that. So the action sequences, for example, are so poorly made that it's really, really funny. There's no, spatial coherence. It really reminded me of watching, Taken 2, for example, if you've ever seen that, where literally, whenever there's an action sequence in that movie, the camera is so shaky that it is just genuinely challenging to tell what's even going on. And I swear, when that was happening in Morbius, I was just I was cackling. I was laughing so hard, and I don't think I was alone. I was a relatively full theater. A lot of people were actually there. I think the popularity of this movie has gone up ever since the meme of it kind of, came out. I was really trying to not disturb other people, but I'm sorry, I don't think I could help it. One other thing that's pretty funny about those scenes is that there's a severe lack of blood. So even though this is a vampire movie essentially, and Morbius is slashing people's throats with his nails and drinking their blood, you don't really ever see any of it because I think it's rated PG-13 in the US, and it really shows. This movie, like Venom, would have really benefited, I think, from having an R rating, because then it could sort of embrace that sort of B-movie slasher kind of schlock that I think would kind of serve it well, and they could lean into the humor of it a little bit with that. But they don't. They shy away from the violence so much that it's actually kind of funny. Just them trying to cover it up. I mean, there's so many really, really interesting examples of that. And it's funny, but then it's also kind of sad, because then you realize the reason that they're doing it, like in Venom, I think, is that they're thinking that it's possible that they can tie in Morbius to the Spider-Man universe. There's, there's an end credit scene that has Michael Keaton in it, who is, in one of the Spider-Man movies. And I think they also show the Daily Bugle at one point, so you get the sense that they want to tie this in, like they're going to do with Venom, to the Spider-Man universe, but it just doesn't really make a lot of sense. The tone of those movies are so different. Also with the action sequences, basically like every Marvel movie I've seen from the past 5 years, there's way too much CGI, but it's even more of a glaring issue here, I think, than in a lot of their other movies, which was really disappointing for me, because again, I was kind of hoping it would be more like B-movie, heavy use of blood, prosthetics, etc., but No. And honestly, a lot of it is just pointless. Like, why does Morbius have a trail of, like, red or purple dust when he's, like, flying through the sky? It doesn't make any sense. One of the other big glaring flaws with this movie is the editing. Just the order in which the scenes take place is very disorienting. It often makes very little sense, the order in which the events take place, and it just really left me confused and, by the end of it, quite bored. They'll introduce a plot point, they'll go away from it for like, 20 minutes or so, and then they'll go right back to the other plot point and, mention that it's at a new stage, and they will not explain at all how it got there. And finally, one of the biggest problems with this movie is the casting of Jared Leto as Morbius. With just about everything I've seen Jared Leto in, he doesn't really have any charisma, and there's nothing, like, interesting about his character. And that was something, when I was comparing the movie to Venom, for example, that was actually, a really glaring flaw for me in Morbius. I didn't really like Venom at all. I think it was kind of a big failure in terms of what it was trying to do with the character, in terms of the action sequences, and just, it failed on a lot of levels. But one thing that I think it really succeeded at was the humor, the kind of back and forth between Eddie and Venom. And there's nothing like that in Morbius. There's nothing to kind of give a sense of lightheartedness. There's nothing to break up the monotony of this just super serious tone that they're going for. I think I counted 2, maybe 3 intentional jokes in Morbius. Neither of them made me laugh, and really the only thing that made me laugh in the movie were the unintentional things. Again, the action sequences. There's a lot of horrible dialogue in this movie that's just, it's hilarious. As far as positives, I mean, I'm really stretching, but I think that Matt Smith and Jared Harris are actually pretty good in the movie. I like both of those actors a lot. Matt Smith was really good in movies like Last Night in Soho and His House, and he actually has a real sense of charisma. There's a scene where he's like, he's kind of the villain, and there's a scene where he's just dancing around in his apartment. That's really enjoyable to watch. And Jared Harris is always good, but he is very underused here. I feel like he's probably on screen for 10 minutes or less. Both of these characters, though, even Matt Smith, are just so underwritten. You don't understand their motivations for doing anything, and so I just didn't care about them at all. So yeah, Morbius is incredibly boring, and if you're looking for, a kind of B-movie, like, so bad it's good kind of experience, I don't really think you're going to find that here. I was really hoping that was what it would be, but it's really not. I think if that's what you're looking for, you're going to be disappointed here. So as far as a grade, I liked Matt Smith and Jared Harris, so I'm going to give Morbius 1 star, but I think that might be a tad generous. In a sense, I mean, again, like, this is kind of what I want a lot of superhero movies to be nowadays. I think the big ones really take up just so much space at the theaters that it's really limiting the kind of movies that are being made nowadays. But, at the same time, I would rather watch a movie even though I didn't like it, like Spider-Man No Way Home, just because it's more of a satisfying narrative than something like Morbius. But yeah, that's going to do it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, you can like it down below, and subscribe to the channel. I've got more content coming out soon, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.